This is Colombia. Colombia is a state in South America. And there in the middle of the jungle, about 25 years ago, they discovered a city. You see it here. This city is called the Lost City. Finally, the first archaeologists come there and they find out who were the owner of the city. By the way, if you look at it, it looks like a wedding cake. One terrace built next to the other. And this city, the Lost City, altogether is bigger than Machu Picchu in Peru. You know Machu Picchu. But this is not open for tourism because the people still live there, the descendants of the original tribe. The original tribe were the Dogu. The Kogi. I was brought there by a helicopter, by the army helicopter. Otherwise, if you have to find the city, you have to go by horse. It will take about 5 days to find the place. So, not open to tourism. This whole jungle is completely built over with stones, millions and millions of stones, not large stones like megaliths, small stones. You see that stairway up there? I counted the step. It's 1,137. Always one terrace to the next terrace. Wherever you look around, it's all built, it's all construction. The Lost City, officially in archaeology, they call the city Buritaca 200. What does this mean? Buritaca is a small river which flows here through the valleys. And this Buritaca river has about 200 side rivers, creeks. That's why they call it Buritaca 200. Now, archaeology found out who were the constructors of that city. One terrace next to the other, you see it here? It was the Kogi or the Cagaba Indians. And when the Spanish came to South America about 450 years ago, they killed and destroyed everything. They also killed most of the Kogi Indians. Some of their leaders survived, and they still live in that old city here. Now they have a very, very interesting mythology. These Cagaba Indians say that first, gods have descended from the sky. They have a complicated word for their gods. And then a great flood came, and the gods disappeared with some humans in a ship. And when the flood was over, the gods returned from heaven again. And they are absolutely persuaded that the gods will return again. By the way, in one of these next years, they are waiting for the return of the gods. And they have very, very interesting symbols. You see, this is one of the Cagaba huts, you see, houses. Now, bring it so. The house is composed of 9 different levels. And we, the earthlings, we are living on level number 5. And only much later, when the modern telescopes, of 5-meter telescopes, have been developed, they found out that Sirius is surrounded by an invisible star. In astronomy, the big Sirius is called Sirius A, and the invisible star is called Sirius B. But this invisible star is a so-called white dwarf. White dwarfs are very, very strong in mass. They have a strong mass, gravity, but you cannot see it. And this invisible Sirius B surrounds Sirius A every 50 years. But these people could not have known this. Again, from a technical point of view, they are primitives. They have no telescopes. They have no modern thing. And they know it, and they make their dances since centuries. So it has been suggested maybe a missionary visited them, and the missionary knew something about astronomy. So he told the Dogon, well, you adore Sirius, but there is a little star going around them. No, it's not true, because they have their knowledge since centuries. You see, their masks are so complicated that the masks have a date in it. Every 50 years, there are other masks, and every 50 years, there are other inscriptions or signs on this mask. Now, when the festivity, the big festivity is over, they do not destroy their mask. They keep it in the main house. Now, you simply have to count the masks. Every mask counts for 50 years. 50, 100, 150, 200, etc. So you know they are doing this since eternity. So there is no missionary who could have influenced this. And we know about Sirius B only since 1927. It's an absolute mystery. So they say the God who visited them, his name was Nomo. And Nomo promised them to return one day. Like the Kogi in South America, you know, with this city of terrors. They here in Africa have the same knowledge and the believing. All through these so-called primitive tribes are separated from civilization. They know of the return of the gods, and they wait for the return of the gods. Down in South Africa is a state called Zimbabwe. Earlier it was Rhodesia, now it's Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe has an incredible ruin. Nobody understands the ruin of Zimbabwe because there is no treasure, there is nothing to hide, there are no openings, there are no windows, you could not shoot down, you could do nothing on this gigantic wall. It always was the question, what is it? The locals who live here, they say, we don't know who made this wall and what the purpose is. Now in the meantime, we find out that this wall in Zimbabwe, by the way, it's a symbol of Zimbabwe, represents in reality the star of Sirius with the surrounding of the invisible A, Sirius A is visible, and the invisible Sirius B. They show exactly how Sirius B, this is Sirius, the big star, a block, and this wall symbolizes Sirius B surrounding Sirius. You see it here. So someone of the ancestors of the today's Dogon must have represented, must have made all this in stone for eternity. And now we found out, hey, that's the Sirius system. You know, Sirius, the bright shining Sirius, is down here. And the invisible Sirius is surrounding in an eclipse like this. And the Dogon, they know that there are not only Sirius B, there are some planets surrounding them. That's why we see other things here. It's a model of Sirius in stone. And another mystery, a never-ending story, cargo cults. You all remember what cargo cult is. Cargo cult is technology which somebody does not understand. So whenever two civilizations come together, the technologically primitive civilization sees some technology, doesn't know what it is, and copies it, not knowing what they're doing. What is this here? This comes from Egypt. Officially, they call it a jet pillar. What is a jet pillar? Jet pillars in Egypt, they exist in different sizes. Very small, very big. You find them all over. Always a jet pillar. And what do archaeologists, Egyptologists say? What is a jet pillar? There are about 15 different meanings in literature, and no one knows what it is. Some say it's a symbol of the god Ptah. Ptah was the god of science in ancient Egypt. Others say no, it's a symbol of fertility. Others said it's an ear of corn. Then it's a symbol of eternity. Always a jet pillar. No one knows what a jet pillar is. I say it's cargo cult. These ancient Egyptians saw something technology. They could not understand it, what it was. It belonged to the gods. It was important. So they copied it and made it. And I try to prove this in the next minutes. So, you see, always. Jet pillar. This here is the temple of Abydos in Egypt. All Egyptian, most of the Egyptian temples are all right and left of the Nile. This is Abydos. Abydos was constructed by the pharaoh Sethos in about 1300 BC. Now inside this, you still today have wonderful paintings in color. And there you see the jet pillar. In that case, the jet pillar is so big that the goddess Isis makes a present to the pharaoh. He gives them a jet pillar. What is he giving to him? What is that jet pillar? We continue that story. First, Abydos, when you ever go to as a tourist to Abydos, don't go only inside the temple and watch these wonderful paintings. Go outside in the back of the temple. Then you come to a place which is called the Osirion. Why is the Osirion? You know, the oldest god in Egypt was Osiris. Osiris is equal as Orion, the star. It's the same thing, Osiris and Orion. And there is a legend. Osiris had a brother, and his brother didn't like Osiris, and he killed his brother. And he separated his body into different pieces, and the head of Osiris would be buried here. That's why they call it Osirion. Now this is down under the temple of Sethos. Now look at these blocks here. Cut perfectly. Now these blocks, again, are granite from Aswan. Aswan is about 500 kilometers from here. Of course, this is on the Nile, so they could transport it from the Nile. And then they had to make a grounding with gigantic stones and to put these blocks perfectly over it. And look at the technology. And imagine what sort of crane did they had. Transport these blocks from Aswan down there, put them here. Some crane must have put them precisely into the next opening, you see here. This is high technology. And this is much older than the temple of Sethos, because the temple of Sethos is built over that Osirion. That means this is older than the temple. Evolution of technology. The evolution of technology, our Stone Age people, they start very slowly. They find out that you can put some stone, a little wall, before your cave. So the animals, the wild animals cannot come into the cave. Later you find out that you can cut the stones. Then you find out that there are different stones in different degrees, hard and soft and so on. You can cut them, you can polish them, etc. It's all an evolution of technology. It takes really hundreds and hundreds of years before your evolution of technology is so advanced that you construct these gigantic blocks, up to 80 tons. Evolution of technology that you can transport them from Aswan here, that you have the technology to put them exactly on place. This is evolution. But you see, the temple of Sethos is built over these blocks. This Osirion is older than the temple, which means the evolution of technology is completely upside down. It should be the other ways. The primitive technology, the small stone blocks, should be down, and the higher technology should be up. Some archaeologists, among them Swiss archaeologists, say this is the oldest place, holy place in Egypt, even older than the pyramid. But now the pyramid officially is about 2,500 BC. According to the literature, it's about 14,000 BC. It's still a mystery, Osirion. And we are still on the hint of this jet pillar. See a little movie. You see, there is the water down here. The water comes from the Nile. The Nile is just about 200 meters away, which means technology is more complicated. They had to provide the water, but the water could not be there before they start building. Mysterious. And those of you who have been in Peru, in Cusco, and in Saqqara, you remember the walls there? It's the same way of building. But here we are in Egypt. And this construction is not comparable to this up here. But this is Sethos, and this is unknown. So, jetzt gaan we auf Dendera. Hè? Again, on the Nile, there is another temple called Dendera. This is Dendera from outside. Now, Dendera is a relatively young temple. It comes from the time of the Ptolemies, means about 200, 300 BC, so not very old. But this temple is constructed on a level, on the ground, which is thousands of years old. In reality, on this level, 4 different temples existed. Now look at the ceiling of it. Here you see the gods again. Osiris in his ship, in his bark, between the stars. It's not the sun who rises up in the east and goes over the Nile and sinks in the west. The gods are on the stars, between the stars, in their ships. And I told you the ground is very, very old. No one knows how old it is. When you ever are in Dendera, go to this place. There's a little opening, not bigger than for a dog. You have to climb in this opening. You will just see it here. Into the ground, the movement of the ground. And you enter a little room, very small, but the walls, left and right, are filled with hieroglyphs. You see how small the room is. The man is just space for one man. And then again, we find this miracle of the jet pillar. And here it looks technical, because this looks like an electric bulb. And the jet pillar, you see it here, is holding the bulb. And it looks as if some electricity comes in here. And 2 apes are symbolizing the danger of it. In official archaeology, this is just the womb of an unknown goddess who gave birth to Osiris. But it could also have a technical interpretation. Maybe it's something completely different. Some 40 years ago, in Egypt and also in Persia, different objects were found. And when these objects were opened, inside there were 2 different sorts of metal, iron and copper. And this is a cylinder of copper, and then is a piece of iron in there. And down you found a little piece of a bit of acid, like acid from leaven or acid from wine. If you have 2 different metals and with acid and put it together, this means an electrical battery. And in fact, it gives electrical power. We have made a copy of it in Interlaken in Switzerland, in the Mystery Park. A copy of it, we put acid of lemon inside, different metals, and of course, it gives light. So the question is, did our forefathers in Egypt, did they have electricity? Now, I don't think of our electricity daily, not at all. I just think some priests knew something from the gods. Maybe they were able to enlighten just a little room, to make like a miracle for the people. The people adored them, and they on command, hey, look at this. Something is lighting and shining. It's the gods coming to us. And this secret is symbolized down in the temple of Dendera. And the jet pillar would be part of this system of electricity. That's just an idea. What the final answer is, nobody knows. So, yeah, I have a complete different. Now, first I should tell you the joke about this. You know, the city of the Dogon in Mali is Timbuktu. The capital is Timbuktu. Now, what I tell you now is really just a joke. It has nothing to do with my hypothesis. No. So, imagine there is a competition, a quiz show, and a priest is fighting against a travel agent. They are fighting on television. And after 5 minutes, both the priest and the travel agent have the same amount of points. And the manager says, now, come on, I ask now everyone the same question, and the public should decide by applause who wins. So here is the question. Make a short poem, not longer than 4 lines, but the last word of the poem has to be Timbuktu. So the priest starts and said, I was a preacher all my life. I had no children, had no wife. I read the Bible true and true, all on my way to Timbuktu. So not bad, okay. Then the travel agent came and said, when Tim and I to New York went, there were some ladies cheap to rent. They were 3 and we were 2. So I booked 1 and Tim booked 2. I don't know what God is. I think God is the universe. God is the waves of the universe. God is eternity. I cannot understand it. But to my religion, in which I was educated, the Christian religion, and to all the other big religions on this planet, I have still a lot of questions. When I was a boy, they told me in the beginning was God. Okay? Of course, in philosophy, in religion, nobody can answer where did God come from. We don't know. God just existed all the time, whatever it is. And in science, they said no. In the beginning, there was the Big Bang. Okay, but what initiated the Big Bang? We don't know either. So if you look at it religiously, philosophically, or if you look at it scientifically, we have no answer for the beginning. God or Big Bang. Now, according to my education, the Christian education, this big God decided to create all the suns and the planets and the plants and the trees. And finally, he decided to make Adam and Eve, and he put them in the paradise. Het speelde dat zo? I don't know. Ah, okay. That's just in German, the holy writing, the holy book. So, put them in the paradise. Now, he says, always according to my education, he says to these 2 people, Adam and Eve, you may do everything here. You may rule over the plants, over the trees, you do everything. But one thing you are not allowed to do. You are not allowed to eat from this apple tree. Now, maybe the word apple tree is just symbolic for something else. But the clue is they were allowed to do everything except one. They were not allowed to do it. And promptly they do the one thing which they were not allowed to do it. Now, in religion, they call this the original sin. Now I have a question to my Christian God. For me, God is timeless. God doesn't make an experiment and then he has to wait what the result is. He knows the result in advance because he's out of time. So he should knew in advance that Adam and Eve would eat that apple. But obviously he didn't knew. And now he's very, very suspected and he throws the 2 people out of paradise. Those people. Out of paradise. Now, Adam and Eve, they are not in paradise anymore, but all their descendants, they are punished with the so-called original sin, according to our Christian religion. Now, in the Bible, it says God created everything, and God created Adam and Eve, and God said it was good. But later, God did not find it good anymore. And he decided to destroy whole mankind through a great flood. The great flood, the biblical flood. So, I mean, all the humans now are dead except Noah and his ark. But the original sin should be washed away now because there are no humans anymore except Noah. But now the original sin still exists, and much later, thousands of years later, the Almighty God sends Jesus to us as the Son of God, according to my religion. And now Jesus is working around, he's preaching, he's doing good things, but these idiots of humans don't understand him. They don't understand what he says, and finally they even torture him, and they kill him, and they crucify him. And now God, the Almighty God, is happy, and this original sin is forgiven. Something sounds unlogical to me in here. What are we learning? So I don't know. Anyhow, that's my religion, and in the Jewish community, they believe the same thing in the beginning. But only a few hundred years later, exactly 610 years later, by the way, a big religion is made out of this idea, our Christian religion. And it is the religion of Christianity goes all over the planet. There is not only the Catholics, I mean, there are the Protestants, there are the Baptists, they are called all kinds of Christian, different religions, but they all mean the same thing. So, religion. But about 610 years later, in today's Saudi Arabia, there's a young man with the name of Muhammad. And he says that an angel, his name was Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, he had a vision of the angel Gabriel in a cave. And this Gabriel told him that our Christian religion is wrong. The God made a mistake. And now Gabriel is telling Muhammad, the new religion, which is the Holy Quran, according to their belief. And now a gigantic new religion goes over the planet. In the meantime, we have more than 1 billion Muslims on the world. But to my primitive knowledge, God can make no mistake. So first we have the God of Christianity with his original sin. Now an angel comes and says, I'm sorry, this is all a mistake. I made a mistake. Now this is the newest religion here, the Muslim religion. But this is impossible. God makes no mistake. Or is this all just human? Was there no angel? Nothing behind it. And that story continues. Throughout centuries and centuries, always humans have some visions, have some ideas, and new religions were found. You remember one of the religions here in your country are the Mormons. Now, I'm not a Mormon, and I respect every religion, but I know their story. Again, there was Joseph Smith, this young man in Palmyra, and Joseph Smith, again, he had a vision. An angel with the name of Moroni came to him, showed him, and told him, you must go to this hill behind your house, and there you will find a secret cave, and in the cave you will find metallic plates. So Joseph Smith went there, he found the metallic plates, of course, but he could not read it. It was an unknown writing. So the angel Moroni gave him 2 stones and told him, when you put these stones on your brain, you can read and translate these metallic engravings. So he did that. And the result was the Book of Mormon. And again, of course, the Mormons, respected religion, they think our own point of view is the correct point of view. That's what every religion says. Our viewing of the thing is the only true thing, and the other views are. But again, the real God, the God of eternity, the God of the universe, would never make mistakes. What are we doing? And finally, we are fighting since centuries because of all these religions, each one against the other. We have 100 religions on the planet in the meantime. By the way, the Book of Mormon is not only a story of the last century. The Book of Mormon starts thousands of years in the past. That was written on these metallic plates, which Joseph Smith translated. And it starts with a story which is incredible. That once, long before, Mormon, in a place near Jerusalem today, there was a man called Lehi. And Lehi, again, he saw somebody descending from the sky in a glittering ray, glittering suits. And this somebody ordered Lehi, you should construct 2 ships. And Lehi said to the angel, I cannot build ships. I am a simple shepherd. I have nothing to do with ships. But the God said, I will show you plans, how you construct the ships. And he gave them plans. And the men around Lehi, the carpenters, helped him to build these ships. Now I have another problem. In that case, Lehi receives plans to make ships. In our Christian place, we have the great flood, and God gives Noah, again, the plans to construct the ark. So long, so large, etc. We have the Kogi Indians, which you saw before in South America, with these terraces. They again said, the gods give them plans to construct a ship. What kind of God is this? In each of all these things, which cannot make just like this, hocus pocus, and here are the ships. He needs technology. He is not almighty. He needs technology, plans, wood to construct the ship. So in that case too, Lehi constructs 2 ships. When they entered the ships, they realized that it was completely dark inside the ship. There was no light. So the so-called God gave them, for each ship, 2 bulls, shining bulls. There was light in there. And finally, the God gave to the answers of the Mormon 2 compasses. For every ship, a compass. And tell them where the needle shows, there we have to go. So they crossed the sea. The ancestors of the Mormons, they crossed the sea. According to the Mormons, they arrived in today's Chile. They slowly went up to South America until the Salt Lake City in your state where they live today. Now, all this is a story of religion, always inspired by some angels. Which angels are this? What is going on? Why do we all believe our angel, our religion, our point of view is the only one? And this story continues until to our days. In Fatima. Fatima is a place in Portugal. On the October 13, 1917, something incredible happened. 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, were out and they had their ships, and of a sudden they saw the vision of a wonderful lady in a white garment. And the lady had around their head stars, a crown of stars. And of course, Fatima is a Catholic place in today's Portugal. Whole Portugal is Catholic. So for the children, this apparition was definitely the mother Mary, the mother of Jesus. So these children went back to their home and told the story. We saw the mother over a tree. And the adults said, now come on, this is all mistake. You have dream, you have fantasy. It's not true. But the oldest lady, the oldest girl, Lucia, stamped on the ground and said, no, Mama, this is absolutely true because the lady promised us she will return every month, the following months, for 6 months at the same time. So it was at 10:15 in the morning. Every month at the same time, every year, by the way. So, every year. Am 13. Oktober, yes, 13th October. No, it started on 13th of May. 1970, that's important. So, 17, yes, 17. So, every month again, of course, always more adults went with the children out on the field. And exactly on the time, the 3 children fell down on their knees. They started to pray, they looked up to the tree, but nobody else saw something. Just the 3 children. Of course, they had a vision because they were speaking. You see, they're moving their lips, and they were pale, and they had big eyes, but nobody else saw something. This repeated every month, always at 10:15 in the morning, until October 17th, 1917. And then, at that day, 80,000 people came out of the field with the children. 80,000 people. On that day, it was raining. There are, in 1917, there were no colored pictures as today. You only have black and white pictures. So out of newspapers, I took some of these old pictures. You see 80,000 people on the field. It was raining. They all had their umbrellas. And of a sudden, exactly on the minute where the Holy Mary should appear, the heavens opened. And they saw a gigantic disc. And the disc turned all the time. And while the disc was turning, different colors in different shapes appeared. This spectacle took place for 4 minutes. You see, now it's not raining anymore. All these people are looking up there, blinded somehow by the light. It took 4 minutes. In the Catholic Church now, this is called the miracle of the sun. And Fatima has become a pilgrim place. Today, at least every year, more than 2 million pilgrims are going to Fatima. In the in the church of Fatima, in the cathedral, this miracle of the sun is shown in the glass picture up there. Now, one of the children, the oldest one, Lucia, she later becomes a sister in a convent. She received a telepathic message from this white lady. And the white lady ordered the child, you should put this message down in your school book, whatever. And give this message to the highest responsible of this planet. The highest responsible. With the order, he should open this message for whole mankind, humanity, in 1960. On October 17th, 1960. That means 47 years later. So for the girl, for Lucia, the child, it was Mother Mary. And she believed, well, the highest, she means the Pope. So this message, the secret, went to the local priest, from the local priest to the bishop, from the bishop to the cardinal of Portugal, from the cardinal to the Vatican in Rome. With the order, you should open this message for whole humanity on October 17th, 1960. 1960 arrived. The journalists knew, of course, about this date because this girl, Lucia, she went to a convent and sometimes she gave an interview. Journalists asked them, Mother Lucia, what is written in the secret of Fatima? And she always said, I have no permission to say anything about it, but the Pope will open it for all of us on October 17, 1960. So October 17, that's just the Pope who since then ruled. The date arrived. The Pope in Rome assembled about 70 bishops and archbishops, etc. Outside the door were journalists, 20 journalists. They were waiting, what's the secret of Fatima? Finally, the doors opened and all these bishops came out and they were pale and wet and perspiring and they had wet collars. And the journalists asked them, what is the message of Fatima? What did the Holy Virgin Mary give to the child? And they all said, no comment, no comment, no comment. Only the Pope, when the Pope himself came out, he had to say something. The journalist asked, what is in the secret of Fatima? And the Pope said, I cannot publish the secret. It would create a panic. The Pope said, I cannot publish, it would create a panic. Now again, I am educated as a Catholic. And as a Catholic, it is, we have to believe that the Mother Mary was the mother of Jesus Christ. And the Mother Mary went to heaven with her body. So in religious talk, Mother Mary is the highest female in heaven. So one would assume that Mother Mary knows exactly what she does. And she gives the order to the children. Give this message to the Pope, to the highest. And he should publish it in October 17th, 1960. And the Pope reads it and says, I cannot do this. It would create a panic. Oh my goodness. But the order comes from his highest female boss up there. Why is he not publishing this secret? Now in that time, in 1960, there was still Cold War between the Soviet Union and the West. There was still Cold War. And we always were afraid at that time that somebody would knock down the other nation, that they would send Pershing SS-20 rockets and so on. So the journalists, which did not receive an answer from the Pope, went to the Bishop of Leiria. Portugal has different provinces, and Fatima is part of the province of Leiria. So the journalists went to the Bishop of Leiria and asked him, what is in that secret of Fatima? Has it to do with the next World War? With the Russians or the Americans start some rockets? Are we destroyed, all this? And the Bishop of Leiria said, no, it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the next World War. It has to do with our faith, with our belief. Now, I really are full of problems concerning this story. The Pope did not publish. The Pope said it would create a panic. The Bishop of Leiria said, no, it has nothing to do with the next World War. It has to do with our faith, with our belief. But Mother Mary knows exactly what she's doing. So what was in the message? Now what I can offer is only a speculation. I think that in 1917, some extraterrestrials were here. They observed our planet again, and they realized that in 1917, we had no global communication systems. In 1917, there were no satellites. There were no television, global television. If a king in 1917 would stand before the microphone, the world would not hear him. They realized this, these extraterrestrials. They get in contact with children and give to the oldest children the telepathic message. Why to children? Why do they don't go to a scientist or to a politician? The brains of children are still free, innocent. You know, the brains of adults, we have problems, be it financial problems, be it problems with love, be it problems, whatever it is, we all have problems. We are not innocent. So you contact an innocent person. If they would have contacted, for example, a scientist or a politician, and this politician would come and say, hello, I had a vision of extraterrestrial, a message. The humanity would say, is he crazy or what? It is thousands and thousands of years ago. No one knows how long ago. But I guess at least 6,000 years, when gigantic spaceships surrounded our planet. How do we know this? We know it first from the old literature. There is the Bible, there is the book of Enoch, there are old Indian texts. And in some of these old Indian texts, it's the Mahabharata, the 5th book, which is called Mausala Purva. There you can read that one day, gigantic cities appeared in the sky. At that time, they called them cities. They had no word like spaceship or mother spaceship. The humans were looking up to the sky. There were 3 different cities in different colors, and they were surrounding the planet. And all of a sudden, smaller vehicle came down. The old Indians called these vehicles the vimanas. Out of these smaller vehicles, some teachers appeared. And these teachers looked around, and they took 2 or 3 or 4 of the humans, which seemed to be intelligent. They took them into their vimanas and brought them up to the cities in the sky. One of these humans' names was Arjuna. He was in totally 3.5 years up there. He even learned the language of the extraterrestrials. And when he returned to our planet, he of course described what happened. What had he seen up there? And all this you can read in the 5th book, in the Mausala Purva of the Mahabharata. Now, we took these old texts and we showed them and read them to our young computer animations. And we said, now look, this text is 6,000 years old. Just imagine how would it look like if we transfer these old messages into our today's computer animation. And that was the result. Arjuna described a city in the sky which looked for him as if it was composed of different big bulls. And always there were these vimanas around, these smaller vehicles. He says that up there he saw hundreds of different types of vimana. The one vimana which brought him up had the form of a stupa. The stupa looks like a bell. You will see this later. He even gives us the name of the pilot. The pilot's name was Matali. And he said, I saw so many things up there. For the first time, I saw the stars. And they explained me what a star is, because in the beginning, they always believed, the human, that the stars are just lights which the God hang on the sky. Now they understood what a real star is. And he learned the language of the extraterrestrials, and he finally understand that they had problems among themselves. They were not lovely beings. Some of them hate each other. It had to do with raw material on earth and so on, and with boys and girls, which they captured. And suddenly, a war took place in heaven. 2 of these cities in the sky were destroyed. And for the humans on earth, it looked as if 10,000 falling stars would come to the ground. Now this is all an old stories, really 6,000 years old. And our first reaction would be, this must all be fantasy, just imagination. A war in heaven, around the earth, that's just ridiculous. But ladies and gentlemen, most of the old mythologies on our planet start with the war in heaven. Have you ever read the story of the god Zeus with his son Apollo? Before he arrived in our solar system, he had to fight in heaven against Kronos. You probably are all educated in Christian or Jewish community, and you probably forgot that even in our religion, it starts with the war in heaven. Do you remember the story of the archangel Lucifer? One day, the archangel Lucifer with his disciples went to the throne of the Almighty God and said, we do not serve you anymore. Then the Lord ordered for the archangel Michael to destroy Lucifer and these temples, to throw them out of heaven. When I was a boy, educated as a Catholic in Switzerland, they told me, Erich, if you live in peace, if you are nice to everyone, if you don't kill and cheat and make some murdering, after you're dead, you will come to heaven. Heaven is the most fabulous place, the place of absolute happiness, because there you are united with the Almighty God. But if you are in a place of absolute happiness, then there is no opposition. You cannot make war in heaven. We should understand the word heaven differently now. What is heaven? Heaven was space. What is an angel? And I mean the angel which are written in the old holy text, not the spiritual things we believe. What is an angel? In cave painting, you see the angels with wings coming down. The angels are the messengers of the gods. But these angels were not peaceful. They are fallen angels. And here, for example, we have a temple wall in Edfu, Egypt. The inscription says that the Pharaoh needed the help of his god, his name was Horhut, against his enemy. And his god flew up to the sky with the winged sun disk and destroyed in a few minutes 100,000 of the enemies. Which kind of God is this? And you probably don't know, we have the same situation in our own religion. Just read the book of the Kings, chapter 19, verse 35. There an angel from heaven killed in a few minutes 185,000 Assyrians. Just like this. No fight, no battle, no man against man. 185,000 Assyrians were killed. What kind of angels are these? Now, most of these old holy books you cannot control because you don't have them, but there is one book which you can control very, very easily, and this is the Bible. Please go into the Bible, and at the end of the Old Testament, you find the story of the prophet Ezekiel. I first show you now 5 pictures out of old Bibles to give you an imagination what our forefathers had in mind when they read the text of Ezekiel. Then I explain you how and why we made a new interpretation of Ezekiel. And finally, I show you a computer animation to make clear what really happened in the time of Ezekiel. It's absolutely shocking and fantastic. First, you have to know, Ezekiel, by his profession, he was a high priest at the Temple of Jerusalem. In his time, Israel was captured by the Babylonians. Ezekiel and all the high society, and he belonged to the high society as high priest, were captured. They were slaves to the Babylonians. Ezekiel and a few of his men were on a river with the name of Chebar. They were working there as slaves. And then they hear a noise in the sky. And they all look up there. And they see a vehicle coming close down to the group which is working. The vehicle came closer and closer. The noise became bigger and bigger. And everyone fell on the ground. Ezekiel, of course, believed that it must be something divine. He himself is priest. So after a few minutes, he is the first one who stands up to give honor to what he believes is divine. And then he realizes this is not God. And he starts to describe what he sees. And don't forget, Ezekiel is an eyewitness. He describes it in the first person. I saw, I did, etc. First, he sees a big object, and all together, the whole object, he calls the splendorness of the highest. I was educated in a Catholic high school for 6 years, led by Jesuits. In that high school, we had to make translations of parts of the Bible, Greek to Latin, Latin to German. I know exactly what I'm talking about. In your English Bible, including in my German Bible, you read the splendorness of the God. But in the original Ezekiel, the word God never appears. Not one time. He always called it the splendorness of the highest. So there was something glittering up there, and inside something like a throne. And on the throne, someone was sitting, looking like a human. And a little below, Ezekiel saw there were 4 living creatures. These 4 living creatures had wings. And when the wings moved, a terrible noise was heard. Ezekiel compares the noise with the thundering of a waterfall. Must be very, very loud. Then he sees wheels, and now he cannot understand his own life anymore. Wheels of his time go forward and backward, but the wheels he sees here go forward, backward, right and left, all at the same time, without making a steering movement. You see, when you are sitting in your car, steering your car's wheel, now your front wheels make a movement like this, to the right or to the left. Ezekiel sees a wheel which goes forward, backward, right, left, without making a movement, a steering movement. He cannot understand this. He describes this wheel 4 times. And then he sees the legs. The legs were sparkling. They were definitely of metal, and so on and so on. In 1974, long time ago, I had a secret speech at NASA in Huntsville, the American Space Agency. Secret because we both parties, we agreed that no one goes to public, neither the NASA engineers nor I. And on this speech, I was also talking for 5 minutes about Ezekiel. After my speech, the chief of the construction came to me, Mr. Joseph Brumrich, and said, "Hey, Mr. von Daniken, that was very interesting. I never read the Bible, but in the Bible you will definitely not find some technology. These are just visions, dreams. Ezekiel probably saw the Lord sitting on his throne, moving around, or he had some dream, but no technology in the Bible. This is impossible." Anyhow, he said, "You made me interesting about this Ezekiel. Now I will read it for the first time." He speaks 3 languages. He took 3 Bibles in different languages and started to read Ezekiel. And all of a sudden, he was fascinated, because Ezekiel described in detail something which they, the NASA scientists, the NASA engineers, had on their table, on the design table. So Mr. Joseph Brumrich became suspicious. And a small group of NASA scientists came together, and they took the Bible, Ezekiel, word by word. They started to recalculate. What was this? The splendorness of the highest. And finally, they reconstructed the object. And that was the result. This is not a spaceship with which you could move from star to star. Today, we would call it a space shuttle. There must be a mother spaceship in orbit, and from this mother spaceship, this vehicle comes down. The old Egyptian called the same thing the winged sun god, or the old Indians called it the Vimanas. There were different types of Vimana. Ezekiel calls it the splendorness of the highest. On top, he sees something glittering. Inside, there was a throne. On this throne, somebody like a human was sitting in glittering clothes. It was simply the commander of the spacecraft in his spacesuit. Then he sees 4 living creatures with 4 wings. But what do you see, living creatures here? Do not forget, at Ezekiel's time, technology, something like a motor, did not exist. When something moved by itself, for them, it was living. There's no doubt that he means his helicopter, because he describes the noise they made, and even says, when the wings stood still, they were hanging down. When the noise started again, the wings started to rotate. When the wings went up from the earth, the wheels went up too from the earth. Of course, when a helicopter is lifted up, its wheel will also be lifted up. Finally, the wheel. He describes this wheel which could go in every direction, forward, backward, left and right. At NASA, they reconstructed a new wheel. From the wheel's central axis, they went down and made different axes. It is clear to understand, with this wheel you can go forward and backward. If this wheel should move towards you, simply this part would move towards you. The wheel itself never makes a steering movement. By the way, NASA got a patent for that wheel. It's now used on Mars. If here we have some descendants of Ezekiel, ask for money. And this continues. Then he writes the wheel, and he writes the legs, which were striped and sparkling, etc., etc. This goes on and on. Now, when you read Ezekiel, you will realize that from chapter 40, something new happens. You know, chapter 1 to 40, he describes this vehicle, the splendorness of the highest. And in chapter 40, he says, the splendorness of the highest arrived again. So a second time. At this time, the hand of the highest put me up on the second throne. So in my modern view, he's simply sitting on the co-pilot's seat. He's sitting there, and they make a lift up, and Ezekiel feels, he says, the hand of the highest were pressing upon my chest. They go somewhere, Ezekiel has no idea where. He writes, they brought me on a very, very high mountain. He makes it clear, very, very high mountain. And up there, he sees something like a small city or a bigger village. And in the center of it, something like a temple. In the original, Ezekiel never says there was a temple. It always says there was something like a temple. You should ask yourself, what was a temple some thousands of years ago? Simply a building for the gods, or a building which the gods themselves made. Later, it became a religious meaning. So there was something like a temple. He is sitting in this object here, and he looks down, and probably his pilot says, hey, don't be afraid, human. Look down there. And the object, the splendors of the highest, came to a standstill over the so-called temple. And slowly, the splendors of the highest descends into the building. And then it becomes quiet, and of a sudden, another human-like being in a glittering suit comes to Ezekiel. And the first word, the glittering one says, oh, human. You humans have eyes to see, but you see nothing. You have ears to hear, but you hear nothing. And then this being in glittering clothes gives Ezekiel a measuring device and orders him to measure the whole temple, the whole building. And Ezekiel is strong enough, he has courage. He asks back, why? Why should I measure this building? And the other one says, that's the reason why we brought you here. And so he starts measuring. You read it in the Bible, length, large, meters, whatever you wish. The story of Ezekiel in the Bible ends abruptly. The end is not there, gently, but still you have 3 pages of measurements in the Bible. A German engineer, his name was Hans-Herbert Bayer, read these dates, these measuring dates, and asked himself, is this a real building or is it just imagination? And he started to take Ezekiel by word, the measurement, and his group reconstructed the so-called temple. Now make the difference. The NASA engineers only reconstructed the splendors of the highest. The German group now reconstructed only the building. One day, I had a big yellow envelope on my desk, and there were technical designs, drawings, and the letters from this Mr. Hans-Herbert Bayer. I didn't know him before. I was, of course, fascinated. I phoned him and I said, hi, Mr. Bayer, have you ever seen or heard something what NASA in Huntsville did with the splendors of the highest? No, he had no idea. So I brought the 2 men together. And the so-called splendors of the highest, the vehicle, fit perfectly into the temple, the so-called temple. The temple was nothing else than the earth base for this extraterrestrial space shuttle. That's why they did repairs and things like this. Now a few words to Ezekiel. The Ezekiel original text is written in a Hebrew writing, in a Semitic writing. In this Semitic writing, you have no vocals, you have no A, I, etc. You only have consonants. And in this form of writing, in grammatic, only the present exists, not the past or the future. If I would say, I was on a high mountain, that would mean I was there maybe yesterday. When I say, I am on a high mountain, that means right now. When you say, I will be on a high mountain, that means tomorrow. Now in the original Semitic Ezekiel text, there is no past or present. The theologians believe that Ezekiel had a vision. He saw the Almighty God sitting on his throne and flying around. I am personally a deep believer in God. I am still one of these figures who pray every evening. But my God does not need a vehicle in which to move around a vehicle which makes noise, where sand is blown up and all these things. My God is all over. Now the theologians believe Ezekiel had a vision of the God sitting in his chariot. And that the God brought him up and give him the measuring dates of a future temple in future Israel. So when you read Ezekiel, you will read, for example, the temple will be, whatever, 150 meters long. He will be 70 meters large. But in the original text, there is no will be future. Just the building was as long, as large, etc., etc. The theological version doesn't function anyhow not. Because Ezekiel say they brought me on a very, very high mountain. He make it clear, very, very high. There is no high mountain in Jerusalem. I was there many times, a few hills, that's all. He was not having vision of a future temple. He was telling the fact. So what happened at Ezekiel's time? That's at least 2,700 years in the past. The men were working as slaves with the Babylonians, among them Ezekiel. Then they hear the noise. From a mother spaceship in orbit, a smaller vehicle is left out. When this thing touches the atmosphere, only now the rotary blades of the helicopter come down, and only now the noise starts. As long as you are in outer space, you don't hear nothing. The vehicle comes close. The slaves hear the noise. The vehicle comes closer to the group which is working there. Everyone is afraid. Sand is blown away. Ezekiel, as a high priest, believes that it must be something divine. So he, like all the others, fell on the ground. And then, for the first, he stands up. He wants to give honor to the Lord. And then he realizes this is not the Lord. And he starts to describe every detail. The wheels, the wing, the glittering stuff, etc., piece by piece. And then the hand, some hand, pick him up and put him on the pilot's, co-pilot's throne. He's sitting up. By the way, he describes, of course, the legs, which were sparkling, which were shining bright, which are metal. He describes the wheel. And as I said before, the wheel can go forward, backward, right, and left without making any steering movement. He is so astonished of the wheel that he describes it 4 times. Now, he's sitting there. They start, they have a lift up. Ezekiel says, the hand of the highest was pressing on my chest. He feels the start with high speed. They bring him somewhere, he doesn't know where. He says, they brought me on a very, very high mountain. Up there was something like a small city or a village. And he's sitting in there. I guess his co-pilot said, hey, human, just look down, don't be afraid. It's your first flight, enjoy it. So Ezekiel is sitting in there. He sees that inside this building is one big building. He calls it something like a temple. Then the splendorness of the highest came to a standstill directly over the building. And slowly, slowly, the splendorness of the highest sinks into the building, which means the building had no roof. At this moment, Ezekiel describes very precise that the noise of the wings were this time twice as loud as at the first visit in the desert, because now the echo is shouting back. And then this strange, glittering, human-like figure come on and said, oh, human, you humans have eyes to see, but you see nothing. You have ears to hear, but you hear nothing. And then Ezekiel had to measure this building, and he even asked back, why should I measure this building? And this one said, well, that's the reason why we brought you here. What was the reason? Why should thousands of years ago a human measure a building? Just imagine the situation. There's a group of slaves. The extraterrestrial observe this group of slaves. They learn the language. They realize which of these humans is the leader of it. They come down. They capture the leader of them. They bring him to this very, very high mountain. He has to measure the building. And then they bring him back to his own people. What happened? His own people, hey, Ezekiel, you are back. We are very happy to see you again. Where have you been? And he described, they brought me on a very, very high mountain. There I had to measure a building. Here are the dates, the measuring dates. The extraterrestrials knew exactly that at Ezekiel's time, There was no technology of flying, technology of helicopter, etc. But of course they knew that in a few thousand years in the future, there would be our technology. Now you just take one of these humans, which is the leader. You know exactly the humans believe that what they do is something divine. Now the humans is brought back with his measuring dates, and they know it become religion. They believe it has to do with God. In reality, it's not God. So it enters into the Holy Book, and soon it's in the Holy Book. It doesn't matter how many wars the human will have in the next thousands of years. The religious books, the holy books, are never destroyed. They survive. They knew exactly, in the far future, the humans will read that text. They will realize this had nothing to do with the real God. It was technology. And now the humans start to ask questions. Questions like I do. What is this? Did we have maybe a higher civilization in the past? Or have we maybe been visited by ETs? If yes, what is the proof? And that's exactly the situation we have today. Because of Ezekiel's text, but not only of Ezekiel's text. There are many other holy texts which report the same thing in their language, in their culture. The Mahabharata in India, the 5th book, is just one example. Another of these examples is Enoch. Have you ever heard of Enoch? Enoch in the Bible, you just hear 2 phrases of him. It says Enoch was the 7th patriarch before the great flood, and Enoch was the first human who disappeared in a fiery chariot in heaven. That's all what you read in the Bible. So how do we know about the book of Enoch? 170 years ago, a British man came to Ethiopia. He finally was there over 30 years, and he was in an Ethiopian convent. And there he learned the language of the Ethiopian perfectly. And in the old library, he found a book called the Book of Enoch. He was shocked at the beginning. He knew the name of Enoch from the Bible, but the Book of Enoch? So he translated this Book of Enoch from Ethiopian language into English. And in the year 1900, the German Professor Dr. Emil Couch translated from the English version Enoch into German version. I will just tell you the most extreme story of the Book of Enoch, and then you probably have to wish, hey, I want to read the original. And you go to the bookseller and say, hey, Mr. von Daniken was talking about the Book of Enoch. Where is it? In reality, a Book of Enoch does not exist. In the German version, the Book of Enoch is part of apocryphic texts. Scientific books, there are many volumes. This is volume 2, translated by Professor Dr. Emil Couch in 1900. In there, you find 126 pages of Enoch. Now, like Ezekiel, Enoch is an eyewitness. He writes in the first person. He explains it was evening. The whole community wanted to go to sleep. Then they hear a noise in the sky. Everyone runs out of their huts. And they see some lights coming out of the sky, like Ezekiel. Then, of a sudden, 2 beings in glittering clothes come close to the group which is waiting. They all are afraid and run away. Only Enoch stood still. He writes, I was 12 years old then. Now, when these 2 strangers come close to Enoch, he's afraid too, and he also falls on the ground. Of a suddenly, someone packed him and make him stand on his legs. And the voice said, don't be afraid, human. Don't be afraid, human. We won't hurt you. How is it that extraterrestrials speak the language of Enoch? In my eyes, some thousands of years, a group of ETs came to our solar system. The mother spaceship was surrounding the Earth. With smaller vehicles, they have come down to our planet. They behaved themselves like today's ethnologists would do. They learned a few languages of a few groups. Now to learn a language is very, very easy. In our time, or 100 years in the past, ethnologists, for example, they went to the upper Amazon River or to the Nile, and they came together with cultures. None of these cultures spoke English or German or Spanish or whatever. It was the ethnologists who learned the language very, very quick. With their technology of extraterrestrials and their computers, they would analyze the language, I guess, within a few days. So to me, it's no problem when some extraterrestrial uses the language of the human. Hey, human, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, we won't hurt you. In a discussion just 2 weeks ago in a theological university in Switzerland, I was attacked by one of the priests who said, Erich, you misunderstand all this. These were not extraterrestrials. These were two archangels. I'm sorry, archangels are the messengers of God. God is almighty. God knows everything. God would have known the name of the boy lying on the ground. He would have said, don't be afraid, Enoch. But the stranger don't know his name. Don't be afraid, human. One of them here. So they say to him, if you wish, you can come with us, we will teach you. And Enoch says, yes, I wish. So these three, two of the extraterrestrials and Enoch, they march away a few steps, and one of the extraterrestrials says to Enoch, human, young human, you stink terribly. This poor man in the nose of the extraterrestrials, whatever his clothes were, I don't know, with camel shit or whatever on. So he had to put his clothes completely off to jump into a water. He had to wash him naked from the head down to his feet. Then someone of the extraterrestrials gave him a cream and ordered him to put this cream all over his body. In reality, he was simply disinfected. That's all. Ezekiel smells on his skin and says, and I smelled like ambrosius and other ingredients which we cannot translate. And then one of the strangers gives Ezekiel a suit, the same suit which they wore on. Enoch doesn't know what to do with it. One of the strangers explains him, Enoch puts these trousers on. And when he's dressed like them, he looked at himself and he said, hey, I looked like one of them. Of course, now he's in the same pullover or whatever. Now these three, two extraterrestrial, Enoch, go away. Enoch describes, they brought me to the high flames. Then we went up to the sky. For me, it was as like with many, many winds. He has no words of technology. He compares it with winds. Up there, over the planet Earth, he sees something like big houses in crystal. Gigantic doors opened and closed. He cannot understand what it was. They come into a kind of garden with strange flowers and strange vegetables, which he never saw on Earth. Finally, he came into a big round room. And in the center of the room, there was the highest sitting. And when these three, two extraterrestrials and Ezekiel, came into the room, the highest stood up from his throne, went to Enoch, and shake him his hand and said, welcome, welcome. In theological debates, all this what I explain is completely different. They believe that Enoch was taken into heaven, and now he's standing before the throne of the Almighty God. But even the theologians who translated this Enoch 170 years ago, they understood that something must be wrong here. So the real Almighty God, God from the heaven, would never stand up and shake the hands of a human and give him his welcome. We misunderstood everything. We translated everything wrong. Not because we were wrong or we wanted to make some false things. No, simply because the time was different. 170 years ago, we had no aircrafts on this planet. Not to speak about space travel. All these theologians, wonderful professors who knew many languages, they had no alternative. It was another time, the spirit of time. They believed it must have to do something with the Almighty God. So we translated this in a religious, psychological way, which is completely wrong. The time has changed. It's time we should translate these old texts with new eyes. Angels were extraterrestrials. Heaven is not the place of happiness. Heaven is simply the space. An archangel is the leader of a group of extraterrestrials. Just change 10 words in the old holy text, and you change the whole content. And exactly this happens at the moment. We have Indian professors who now translate old Indian texts with our modern view, and the result is absolutely fascinating. We have in Germany a professor doctor in Sumerology. His name is Professor Dr. Burga, who translated now the first Sumerian text with this modern locking. And I know him in the meantime. He said, Erich, this is incredible. In the past, we translated everything in a religious, psychological meaning. It was wrong. It made no sense. In the meantime, it makes sense. By the way, Enoch learns the language of the extraterrestrials. He often goes down to the planet Earth. He teaches the human. And he's the only one who gives all the names of the extraterrestrials. I know their names. You can read it in the Bible. Why are the critics and the skeptics never reading these texts? We even know which names they had, these extraterrestrials. As I said, Enoch is a long time together with them. He speaks their language. And one day he realizes that some of these, he calls them the guardians of the sky. But when the sons of heaven saw that the daughters of men were fair, they admired them and desired to mate with them. And they said to each other, we will take them as wives. Altogether, there were 200, which descended upon Mount Hermon in the days of Jared. Jared was the father of Enoch. Sex with humans? Extraterrestrials? Is this possible? Do they look like we? Do they have the same sexual apparatus? I come back to this. But to destroy your doubts, just take the Bible. And look at the Bible. First book of Moses, chapter 6, verse 1. When the humans began to multiply and had daughters, the sons of God saw that they were fair, and they took them as their wives. Not only in the book of Enoch, in different other holy books too. Sex with humans, I came back to this. So in Stone Age time, our forefathers were Stone Age people. They had no technology. They started to chisel, to make these gods first in some caves, cave paintings, cave drawings. This is near Switzerland, on the border of Switzerland to Italy. But here we are in Arizona, United States. This is by the Hopi Indians. This is somewhere completely different. This is in Peru. All of you who have been in Nazca, you know this plain of Nazca, I will show it later. When you fly over the plain of Nazca, you first have to fly over this figure. The original is 29 meters high. One arm is bending towards heaven, the other to the sky. And even in official archaeology, this figure is called El Astronauta, the astronauts. Go to the next place. In Ica. Ica is Peru. The natives made figures which you can see only from the air. You do not see them from the ground. Now here you see nothing. It looks like this. You must fly to overlook this figure. Down from down, you don't see it. This continues in the Sahara. Sahara Desert, today's Algeria. Gigantic figures looking like garments, spacesuits. Now I showed you just 6 figures very, very quick. My intention was different continents, including here in Australia. You have the same ones. I filmed about 100 of them 15 years ago when I was invited by some aborigines in the Kimberley Mountains. Why have our forefathers on all the continents made the same gods with helmets, halos around their heads? They had no contact between each other. There was no tourism, no flight, and no ship. Why? Because they all had the same experience. They all saw the same thing from thousands and thousands of years ago. And then later, in the next phase, after the cave painting, they learned how to chisel, how to make figures. That's what they did. We are here in a Maya city. The name is Tulum. Tulum is on the Caribbean Sea. When you see such a figure, you see with his spread legs, he's lying like on a bobsled, coming down. But they always have wing. The whole city of Tulum in the Caribbean is dedicated to the descending gods. In the original, it looks like this. You see the wings? He uses his hands to manipulate some control. The descending gods, there are many of them. I like this one especially. He has shoes on. The wings. The original is unfortunately broken, but you still can see his shoes on, his wings. This continues around the earth in many museums. Here we are in Guatemala City. You find the gods with helmets, and they have something before their nose to breathe, to filter our air. Then you ask the archaeologists, what is this? Well, los dioses, the gods. Which gods? We don't know, the gods which they adored. Here we are in Japan. But in Stone Age time, in Japan, nobody knows something about glasses. So what did they imitate? What did they saw and adored? Because these were holy figures standing on temples. Today they are called the Dogu figures. This one is in Mexico, Villahermosa. Really, if I interpret it modernly, he has a helmet on. There's even a micro on his nose. His hands are looking down, his legs up. He's descending to the humans. He was one of the teachers who came down. I just showed you one cave paintings from the Hopi Indians in Arizona. Later in their evolution, they did not make any more cave paintings. They made paintings on oil. And they make figures. When you once visit Hopi territory in the United States, Arizona, you can rent a car, you can go to their reservoir, Hopi territory. Of course, like always in the United States, somewhere is a souvenir shop where you can buy Coca-Cola and whatever. And then you find these figures. They are different types and different forms. And you find the scientific literature. And then you ask the natives, what is this? What are you doing here? These are all kachinas. What is a kachina? The kachinas were the descending gods, the teachers of the forefathers of the Hopi. And the Hopi still today make these figures. They sell it to tourists just for two reasons. So that everyone should never forget that the original teachers have come from the sky. And that no one is afraid when they return. Because they promised to the forefathers of the Hopi, one day we will return. Now I could say this is a good argument to support my hypothesis. But for me, this is only one of many cases. 10,000 kilometers away from here, on the upper Amazon River, he promised in a far future he would return. They should not forget it. In order not to forget the visit of the teacher from heaven, every year on the upper Amazon River, the tribe of the Kaya make their dance. And their straw man, the man in the straw garment. We should not forgive that they promised to come to us. So evolution in technology grew. Humans learned how to express these gods. Here we are in Palenque. Palenque is Mexico. In 1952, Mexican archaeologist Professor Dr. Rutz discovered up here a groove in the ground, so in the floor. So they opened the door, and inside the pyramid there was a staircase going down. At that time, it was all full with stones. It took 3 years before they arrived, 7 meters under the pyramid. There was a door in the form of a triangle. They opened this door abruptly. That's why it's broken here. And they looked into a room. At that time, there was no grid here. This was made later for the tourists for protection. South of Lima, 500 kilometers south of Lima in Peru. And when you fly over Nazca, of a sudden you see gigantic figures beneath you, figures of monkeys, fishes, spiders, hummingbirds, and then you see something like airstrips. It looks like airstrips. It starts abruptly, ends abruptly. And now whenever I see a television documentary worldwide about Nazca, I get angry. I could cry. We are lied. They don't tell us the truth. In television, wherever, even in the scientific books, they tell us, well, it's very, very easy. You know, Nazca is hot. It's a hot desert. There is sand on the ground, and then are small stones. They look brown stones. And you just have with your feet, you just have to push away these brown stones, and then a brighter shining surface appears. And it is easy to make with this method the figures. But ladies and gentlemen, the figures, the hummingbird, the spider, the monkey, are nothing. The biggest of it is 38 meters big. Compared to these lines, the longest of it is 3.8 kilometers. And among these are small lines. The longest of the small lines is 23 kilometers, going over hills and mountains straight away and ending again in one of these airstrip-like lines here. The public is never shown these things. They always show the figures. Scratch away the surface. It's very easy to make it. We are not told the truth. In the meantime, in all these clever textbooks, I read all the theories about Nazca. Nazca was an astronomical calendar, okay? It was a cult for the water god. Look here. This is a normal mountain. The mountain comes together from both sides to the top of the mountain. This was once a normal mountain, coming from both sides. The top is cut off completely. Where is the debris? Where is the material? And under this airstrip line, you have a zigzag line. You never see these things in television. They don't tell us the truth. So it was a cult for the water god. It was a cult for the mountain gods. Others say it was a cult for agriculture. Then you read it was a pre-Inca sport place, some sort of pre-Inca Olympia. I read Nazca is only a fata morgana. Others say it is a start place for hot air balloons. Look, the mountains and the cut-off mountain here. I read in a clever book, it's in Nazca, these lines are acre plots. In the meantime, we discovered mathematical and geometrical messages in Nazca, which again are not shown to the tourists. You see the circle here, a big circle, and right and left are two small circles. All together, you will see it just as next picture, is created a big triangle. This is a geometrical mathematical message which you can see only from the air. No one on the ground ever sees these things. And it's antique, it's old. I read in the newspaper, this was made today. It's all rubbish, they are telling. It's definitely old. We know it because all this continues here in these valleys. Now, what is it? You see, these pictures of Nazca, you have never seen. They say it was an acre plots, it was a boundary markers, it was procession streets, it was maps, it was a cultural atlas. Look at this, 4 of these airstrip lines, one next to the other here. And the same mysteries still continue always more and more in Egypt. You just hear nothing in public. You all are familiar with the Great Pyramid. And according to archaeology, the Great Pyramid was constructed by a pharaoh. His name was Cheops. That was about 2,500 BC. Or from now on, it's about 4,500 years in the past. That's the official meaning of it. How was the building constructed? There are several possibilities, and they all come from clever engineers. Everything is possible. The first idea is always the ramp. They created the ramp from the Nile to the pyramid. But the Nile and the pyramid are 4 kilometers away. That means the ramp had more volumes in stone than the pyramid itself. Even if you create the ramp just around it, around the pyramid, the ramp still has more volumes of stones than the pyramid itself. Now, we do not have only an evolution in technology. We also an evolution in biology. We also have an evolution in technology. Our forefathers, Stone Age people, slowly had to learn to develop their technology. First, they learned that they can chisel stones, that they can use it as forms of knife. Then they learn later how to transport it, how to move it, how to make bigger blocks. It's all an evolution of technology. You just don't have it like this. Now, Cheops, the constructor of the Great Pyramid, and his father Snorfu. Snorfu was a Stone Age man. Cheops himself, they had copper and probably iron, but still very primitive technology. All this is possible. Of course, you can do it. But first, you have to know the technology. The development of technology is not there at Cheops' time, 4,500 years in the past from now. All this is, of course, possible to make it. But it's not the answer. The answer is, where did the knowledge of the technology come from? How to use these ropes in that and that way? The oldest god in Egypt is Osiris. But the word Osiris is the same as Orion. Isis is the same as Sirius. So it's all linked together with the stars. Inside the Great Pyramids are some shafts. I just will show it. And these shafts end on the belt, on the Orion belt, or at Sirius, Osiris and Isis. You see, in our solar system, we have 3 inner planets and then the outer planets. The inner planets means from the sun, you have first Mercury, Venus, Earth. Inside the Great Pyramid, there are 3 rooms. And you see the distance between one room and the other is not the same. It's the same distance as the 3 inner planets in our solar system. Or the Great Pyramid is just not standing somewhere by coincidence. The distance to the North Pole is the same as the distance to the center of the Earth. There are many of these curious things which the ancestors at Cheops' time could not have known. They, for example, knew nothing about Mercury, the little planet too close to the sun, very hot. So how did they make all these things? And this continues. You see, the tourists today, they have to enter here. That was a broken hole, but the real entry was up there. Now, when you go in there as a tourist, first you have to climb up here. They call it the upgoing channel or shaft. It's 27 meters long, but only about 1 meter high. In practice, you go down to your knees. You climb up here. When you come up at this point, you are completely wet. Sometimes I'm standing up there, and I don't believe my eyes. There are tourists who come in there with their ties. Crazy. When you ever are in Egypt and you have the intention to visit the Great Pyramid, don't take a shower before you go here. We all think the same. Take the shower later, after you visit in the pyramid. Now, after these 27 meters, you come to a standstill, and then you arrive here. This is called the Great Gallery. Now, down here, we had this upcoming shaft, only 1 meter high. Now, this is more than 8 meters high, 47 meters long. Nobody understands this mystery. Why have the constructors of the pyramid first made this shaft? Only 1 meter, not big enough to transport a sarcophagus up here. And then this gigantic thing of 8 meters high. Up there is the so-called king's chamber. And down here is the so-called queen's chamber. Now, do not forget, ladies and gentlemen, all these words, king's chamber, queen's chamber, upgoing shaft, etc., these are all words of our time. We invented these words. We call it king's chamber, queen's chamber. We have no idea what the ancestor called it. In the queen's chamber, there are 2 shafts in the wall. One on the south side and one on the north side. I'm standing here on the south side. And now what I say is very important for your later discussion. That shaft did not exist 160 years before. Only since that time the shaft is here. A British man, his name was Dixon, came to the pyramid. He had a small hammer and he hammered on the wall every centimeter. He was hoping to find some rooms with gold and so on. And at two places, south side and north side, it sounded hollow. And only now they took the hammer, chisel, and opened this thing. Before it was not known. When you look inside here with your lamp, you see it's about 2 meter horizon. Then you see it's going up. In Egyptology, they all believed it's just a symbolic shaft. It's at least not more than 8 meters long. And then a young friend of mine, he's an engineer, his name is Rudolf Gantenbrink, constructed a robot on his own expenses. And he went to the antiquity department to Dr. Sai Havas, and he said, listen, I have constructed this, and I will charge you nothing. With my robot, I can drive into this shaft, so you will know for sure what it is. They were absolutely not happy with Rudolf Gantenbrink's idea. They hated him. But finally they said, okay, come on, you stupid German, go inside with your robot. We know that the shaft is anyhow no longer than at 8 meters. So a new adventure started. The robot was constructed out of steel. There was a halogen light, of course, video camera, 4 wheels. It was called Upuaut. Upuaut is the name of an old Egyptian god. It means the opener of the pathways. And then the robot started to move into this shaft. you see a point here. This is the laser from the robot, which always points ahead of it. When you see these pictures, you get the impression, well, it must be very big. We can climb in there. Forget it. It has only a side length of 14 centimeters. Nobody can climb in there. Now, the walls always changed. It was bubble, then it bubble stones, then it looked like granite. It was alabaster. You will see it later. Alabaster looks like marmor. Then something like doors opened. The robot was climbing slowly up there. The archaeologists had thought that the shaft is by maximum 8 meters long. But the robot did not follow the archaeologist. He simply climbed up inside this shaft higher and higher. All of a sudden, they found grooves on the wall and on the floor. So thousands of years ago, someone must have pressed something through that shaft. And the robot continued his journey inside the pyramid, climbing up slowly, diagonally. First, the 8-meter march had passed. Then he continued 10 meter, 20 meter, 30 meter. At 32 meter, a new obstacle appeared. It was a stone which blocked the continuation for the robot. It took 2 weeks. They had to take out the robot many times and to make it a little smaller. And then after the 5th try, he could go over this block. Here it was 32 meter inside the shaft. It continued 42 meter, 52 meter, and at 62 meters, something like a little door appeared. The door had two bracelets. It looks like bracelets. One, the left one from your side, was falling down. It's down here. You see it on the right side. We don't understand how it comes from the left side to the right side. The wall here is alabaster, like marble. Now the next picture, look at this laser point here. It goes under the door. So we were sure there must be something behind the door. All this was published more or less 14 years ago. I have the whole film of this robot inside the pyramid. The whole film takes about 2.5 hours. You see, always mysteries. So we knew there must be something behind it. As next, the American National Geographic Society came, and they constructed a new robot. And the new robot had a digging. They could make a hole through it. And they made a public TV worldwide where they said, for the first time now, the world public can look what's behind this door, because he made a hole, and for the first time we put a camera into it, which was the next lie. It was not live, it was composited all together. They had put the camera through the hole 3 weeks before. If they would have seen something behind the door, it would never have gone to public. There was nothing behind this first wall. But the camera of the robot saw another wall. And you see, this other wall was about 23 centimeters from the first one away, looked like broken. So the years passed, and 3.5 years ago, a rich man from Singapore came, and he constructed again a new robot. He went to the Department of Antiquity, and he said, my robot can go through the hole of the first wall and break this wall so we see what's behind it. But Mr. Sai Havas from the Antiquity Department, he was completely against it. Never we allow this. All what they could do was make a little hole big enough to put an endoscope through. You know, with endoscopes you go into your stomach. With endoscopes you don't make big pictures, very, very small pictures. The robot's name was Jedi, and that's a word game. Jedi in Arab means Cheops, the constructor of the pyramid. But you remember the Jedi Knights from the Star Wars series who found out everything. So Jedi made a small hole, just big enough for an endoscope. They put this endoscope through the small hole and made a lot of photos, hundreds of it. The computer put all these pictures together. And what's behind it? The next room. And here we have something which we do not know what it is. It could be a writing, but we are not sure. But one thing is clear. It is not hieroglyphic. In the meantime, the sea has been discovered. Of course, we were there. Don't ask me how many $1,000 I always have to pay for backshish to all these make the photos down there here. So first you have an entry, and you see a ladder going down to the entry. And then you came to this shaft here. The shaft is large enough for 2 ladders. You see it here. You go down, you climb down 32 meters. Then you come to a room. Out of the rock, 7 niches are chiseled. But only in 2 of the niches you have sarcophaguses. This one is out of basalt. Basalt is a volcanic rock. There are no volcanoes nearby. And the other one is granite. Of course, they told me when they discovered all this, it was nothing. It was empty. I don't know if it's true or not. Then you continue down deeper. Now the shaft before was as large that 2 ladders, there was room for 2 ladders. Now it's not the same shaft. Only 1 ladder has room here. You climb down in direction under the Great Pyramid. You end not directly under the pyramid. It's a little on the side under the Great Pyramid. And you see a clear water, a lake, as Herodotus was describing. And inside the lake is a sarcophagus, covered by the water, as Herodotus said. He was telling the truth. You see, the pictures are not completely clear. You see the sarcophagus in here because it's covered with water. We could, while making these photographs, we could not use flashes. The flashes would always just reflect the light. But of course, we measured this sarcophagus, long, large, and so. It's definitely bigger than the second shaft, which had only room for 1 ladder. So they cannot have transported this sarcophagus down this chiseled wall. There must be another entry somewhere. So people who believe that there are no more secrets in and around and under the pyramid, they also believe at the Father Christmas. It's continuing and continuing. And the public is not orientated. They don't want that the public starts to ask questions. Hey, why? Who did it? When? What is the explanation? They don't inform you. That's why we exist. Guys like David Childers, me, and others, we are always accused. We make secrets. I'm sorry. We discover the secrets. We are the one who bring the secrets to the public. It's the other side who makes the secret, not we. We are the one who are accused all the time. So when Enoch departed, and he said hello to his son and gave him his book, his son Methuselah also asked his father, will you come back? You will leave now with these guardians of the sky. Will you return here? Will I see you again? And Enoch answered to his son Methuselah, yes, I will return, but we will not see us again. They told me that thousands of years will have passed before I return to this planet again, so you will not be alive. So this promise of returning is an old story which exists worldwide. Now, 400 and 450 years ago, there was no photographic apparatus, so we only have black and white pictures, which were designs. When Francisco Pizarro was the conqueror of the Inca kingdom in today's Peru. When he arrived there for the first time, the natives believed that he was the long-awaited God. They fell down on her knees. The same thing in Central America. Hernando Cortes, the Spanish conqueror, came together with Moctezuma, the leader of the Aztecs. The Aztecs believed at the beginning, hey, they are the long-awaited gods. They fell on the ground. The same thing James Cook in the South Sea. When he came to Hawaii for the first time, they believed he's the long-awaited God, etc. This goes on throughout the planet. Whenever a high-tech civilization came together with a technological lower civilization, the lower always believed these are the long-awaited gods. So this expectation of some gods is not a Christian invention. That happened long before Christianity. And what is today? Again, I'm educated as a Christian. We're waiting for the return of Jesus. But the Muslim society has the same belief. They believe of the returning of their Mahdi. As we know, every Buddhist believes that Buddha will return. The Jewish community are absolutely certain that their Messiah will return. They believe this since 5,200 years. So not only the cultures which passed away believed in the returning, also today's living religion, we all believe that our messenger, God, will return. But unfortunately, not every religion can be right. Some of them must be wrong. I think they are all wrong. Neither Messiah nor Jesus will return, simply extraterrestrials. And then we have the shock of the gods, because we are not prepared for this. And that's why we're doing our job. We want to change the spirit of time. Change your message. Come out to new solutions. Now, very quick for the end here. I'm always accused it's not possible to travel between the stars. Forget it. It's very easy. You all know the space shuttle. With every shot, you transport 30 tons of heavy load between the Earth and the Moon. It's only a question of money if you have 3 space shuttles working or if you have 30. If you would have 30, you start every day and shut 30 tons heavy load between Earth and Moon. Then you create a spaceship which has the form of a ring. It has to have the form of a ring, because when it's finished, you turn it around its own axis. By doing so, you create centrifugal force. Centrifugal force works like an artificial gravity. You have ground under your feet. Then you make an engine, and you start to travel very, very slowly. If this thing, after 100 years, would only reach the speed of, let's say, 2% of the speed of light, you would reach the distance of 10 light years within 500 Earth years. Now you say, come on, now humans will survive 500 Earth years. It's not necessary. This is a generation spaceship. On board, children are made, and they grow up, and children are made, etc. No problem. They come to a new solar system, they find a planet which is similar to the Earth. In the meantime, our astronomy knows that there are thousands of planets similar to the Earth out there. And now we give them time, another 500 years. They were 500 years in their spaceship, another 500 years to construct a new spaceship. They do it. The industry is possible, they have the knowledge. Then something new happened. At once, a spaceship started from Mother Earth, was 500 years on the way. After 500 years, we have 2, the old and the new one. Each one is again 500 years on the way. Then you have 4, 8, 16, and so on. Now a snowball effect starts. With only the speed of 2% of light, you would colonize our whole Milky Way within 10 millions of years. And the only thing we have to do is the first spaceship. So all these scientists say it's not possible to travel between stars. I don't know what they're telling. My fantasy is big enough to imagine maybe we have some planets with flying elephants out there. Maybe there are planets with tentacles or whatever. But there are planets with humans also. This theory is called panspermia. It comes from the Swedish Nobel Prize winner Svante Arrhenius 70 years ago. Somewhere it started, the first form of life. This first form of life spread out its own form of life in the sense of DNA. In the beginning, you do not use spaceship. You just infect a sector of your galaxy with DNA. This is called panspermia. Those who start with panspermia, they know exactly that the biggest part of their DNA would land on a sun, glow. But some little part land on similar planet as the one that they started. And now life begins. The information of life has come from outside. It did not start on this planet. And this, by the way, is the most modern scientific knowledge. Now, in this sense, panspermia, we are the offsprings of extraterrestrials, which does not contradict evolution. But that's another story which I have to tell another year here. This takes an eternity. We are the offsprings of extraterrestrials. Why are we always against this idea? It's because of our education. On these planets, we have 2 groups of humans. One group is educated scientifically, the other group is educated religiously. It doesn't matter what religion. The religious educated people believe God made everything. But as crown of creation, he made us. The scientific people, they believe now it's all explainable with evolution. Evolution, mutation, selection. But we are on the top of evolution. In both cases, if you take it religiously, religiously, crown of creation, or scientifically, top of evolution. In both cases, we think we are the greatest. Something like us does not exist out there anymore. That's our education. That's why we do not want extraterrestrials. They could be greater than us. We have a psychological problem. But they promise to return, and they will return. And maybe they are here again. I show you just something unique to end this here. Inside, fade in all the data, like the exact distance, the exact date, the data on the minute, on the second, the distance to the object. You cannot falsificate these things. It's all real. So someone is here already and is observing us. And they are nice enough not to shock us, to give us a little more time. This object changes its form all the time, becomes bigger and smaller, finally jumps into the water, on the Pacific Ocean, by the way, in Costa Rica. And when it comes out of the water, there are two objects, not only one. The airport was closed here for 2 hours. So we have something surrounding our planet, which is watching us, learning our languages, studying our weapons. Are we a danger for them? And one day, they will appear in public. And they will say, friends, we warned you long enough, but you simply didn't want to see it because you want to be the greatest. You are not the greatest, you humans. And then we have the shock of the gods. Now, all this, what I do, ladies and gentlemen, has nothing to do with the new religion. You don't have to believe one word. I turn myself in my tomb if some idiots come up and they create a new religion or a new sect because of Erich von Daniken's thinking. No, it has nothing to do with believe it. It has to do take it into consideration. Look at the old texts in modern ways, in modern form. And we have enough of indication of the chiseled God, descending God. And this will change your mind and open your mind. And you're not a stupid believer anymore. You are a knower. And you realize at the moment we are still living on a net of lies. Everyone here knows what Nazca is. Nazca in Peru. And of course you saw some pictures on television. But what you see now about Nazca are secret pictures which you never saw before, which they never show on television. First of all, I show you a small movie which we made out from the aircraft about Nazca. There are 25 theories about Nazca. Some people say Nazca is an astronomical calendar. It's an astronomical calendar. It turned out it's not true. It is a cult for the water gods. That's the next rubbish. It is a cult for the mountain gods. Not true again. It is a cult for agriculture. There was never agriculture there. It's just desert. So it's a sort of pre-Inca sports place, some like Olympia. See? All these lines are copies of a Fata Morgana. You know what the Fata Morgana is? You see something in the desert? Look at these lines. Nazca, they said, is a start place for hot air balloons. Inca hot air balloons, so long time ago, hundreds of years. All these lines are so-called acre plots, rubbish. They are boundary makers. You see the lines come together on one point. The lines are procession streets. It's a prehistoric map. Some crook even suggested it's a worldwide cultural atlas. No. By the way, the longest of these large lines is 3.8 kilometers long. The longest of the small lines is 23 kilometers long, going over hills, mountains, straight in the right way. So, now there is an Erich von Daniken Foundation, and we spent about $200,000 to make special measurements on the desert of Nazca. I asked to the scientists of the University of Dresden in Germany to come here and to make special measurements. I wanted to know, what about the magnetic fields here? Can we measure magnetic fields? And of course there were magnetic fields. The magnetic field has changed completely. What about the electrical resistance? I will explain you later when the movie is over. At the end here, the magnetic field had changed completely. So it was a so strong measurement of magnetics that it is not comparable to other places in Nazca. Now wait, this is not Nazca. We are in another place now. We are in Saudi Arabia. And I will explain this just later. I just show you the picture in the beginning. So Nazca is said to be one place in the world where our ancestors made gigantic signs and figures in the ground. But that's not true anymore. In the meantime, we have places like Nazca with gigantic signs in the ground on other places. Here we are in Saudi Arabia. That's a different place than Nazca. That's again in Saudi Arabia. Yes, this is Atacama. Atacama is in Chile. So, the south of South America. The Atacama Desert, here too. And this again is in Jordania. Jordania is not Nazca. This line here, together with this triangle, is 1.4 kilometers long. You can see it only from the air. This is in Australia. And it's like Nazca, thousands of years old, in a desert in Australia. This is Ustyurt. Ustyurt is in Russia. Again, this altogether is 900 meters long. This is here in your country, in Blight. There was just a man here who showed me this. He's a specialist of Blight. You see this giant of Blight here. California, down in the south. Here again, we are in Chile, Atacama Desert. So all over the globe, some people made gigantic signs in the ground, which you can see only from the air. They are of such overdimensional size that you can see them only. Now, before, you had a line on the picture with the red dot. So, I told you, we measured the electrical resistance, sorry for my English. I have to learn a lot here with 80 years. So, now, you put 200 volts on a place, and then you have a measuring device, and you want to measure, is the electricity flowing? Now, in ceramics or sand, electricity is not flowing because it's an isolator. And here, of course, we measured the electrical resistance, and there was no electrical resistance. But here, now remember the red dot of before, it's 8,000 times higher than in the desert. So in the desert, electricity is not flowing. But on the lines, electricity is flowing. You can measure it 8,000 times higher than comparable in the desert. Was kommt als nächstes? Again, the longest of these. By the way, the people in Nazca, sind das schon Einzelbilder? Ja. The people in Nazca, the locals, they differentiate. They differentiate between three different things on the ground. One thing are the pictures. You see fishes, monkeys, apes, flowers, and these things. But all these pictures are small. This is not the question of kilometers. The longest of it is about 35 meters. That's nothing. The next thing is these lines here. They are small. Small, that means only about 1 meter large. But the longest of these lines is 23 kilometers long. And the third thing is this here. The local call it las pistas. They look like airstrips. That's why they call it las pistas. But in reality, they are not airstrips. They start abruptly, end abruptly. There is a road that they call it the Panamericana. The road starts up in Alaska, goes down to North America, California here, Central America, and then all the South American countries. And this road is called the La Panamericana, crossing America. And that's part of the road. But this is thousands of years old. And what are these lines behind it? You see how small these lines are compared to Las Pistas. But that's a disaster. All this mixture of lines here. And they never speak about these things. When you read the official archaeological book about Nazca, they tell you it's very, very easy. It was very, very easy to make all this. There's a surface, and the surface is brown sand and brown little stones. Now you just with your feet, you have to scratch away these stones, and then a brighter shining ground appears. That's true, that's easy. You can scratch away with your shoes some of the stones and the sand, and the brighter shining appears, but not with these lines here, just with the small lines. And you see how big this Nazca is. This whole plateau of Nazca is altogether 65 kilometers long, the whole plateau. And on there you find all these mixtures of large, small lines and pictures. And now comes something very, very astonishing. Look at this figure here. We discovered this about 4 years ago, because you have to fly many, many days over Nazca to see everything. And the pilot, the oldest one, his name was Eduardo, who loved me. He said, Erich, we are not allowed to fly tourists over this, because they are confused completely. We call it, zeig mal weiter, we call it the mandala. It looks like a mandala. Maybe it's something completely different. Now you see, there's a big sign here. A square, then these circles, and right and left are two other circles. All together, all together it makes a gigantic triangle. Weiter. What is this? Concerning the lines, not concerning this, the so-called mandala or chessboard, concerning the lines, I have developed an idea a long time ago. I know definitely from old Indian quotes and books that some thousands of years ago we had a mother spaceship around the Earth. And from this mother spaceship, smaller vehicle came down. Now, a mother spaceship is maybe centuries and centuries on the way before they reach another planet. Of course, with their telescope, they would first look which planet is close to their home planet, not too hot, not too cold, and all this. And after a long trip, a long journey in space, they need energy. Whatever the energy is, maybe they need raw materials, they need some radioactivity, uranium, or whatever, we don't know what. They need energy. Now from the orbit, they make measurings, and they see that in Nazca there is energy. Still today, Nazca in Peru is the largest, was heißt es das? A mine. Still today. Not only gold, other materials, raw materials, are taken up out of Nazca. So they came down with just a little vehicle. Of course, the first vehicle who comes down does not need an airstrip. There's anyhow nobody there to construct an airstrip for them. It just comes down, and near, maybe 20 meters high over the plain of Nazca, it uses an air cushion system. You know, sand is blown away and small stones are blown away until it came to a standstill. Now they make their measurements. What kind of energy is here and how strong is it, etc. And then this vehicle goes again up to the mother spaceship. Maybe 2 or 3 Indians have seen this. They watched it, but they have no idea what it was. Now they go to their tribes and say, hey, something from heaven was coming down. And now the people go on the ground of Nazca. And you see here, there's a line. The line is just blown away stones and sand before the machine came to a standstill. And now they think, well, the gods up there, they want to see lines. Now they start to make lines. In all directions, north and south, and large, small, and thick lines, all thinking the gods up there, they want lines. They made a line on the ground. The natives don't understand what it is. You see, all these lines, these mixtures of lines which you saw before, were not made in one generation. This took many generations. It always was enlarged and bigger. And maybe one day a priest comes up and say, well, I have a bright idea. Priests always have bright ideas. We must show them sacrifices. And now they start, and in the midst of the line, between the line, they start and make gigantic figures now. Fishes, monkeys, spiders, ape, and so on. So that could be the beginning of Nazca, only the beginning. Later, they developed real connections with the humans. And now what this was at the end, why they used it, I have absolutely no idea. That's why with this Erich von Daniken Foundation, I went to the University of Dresden in Germany. Why Dresden? In here in Nazca was an old lady working her lifetime, Mrs. Maria Reiche. And Maria Reiche came from Dresden, originally, from the city of Dresden. Maria Reiche died and her sister died too. We had often a confrontation together. But she was wonderful, a wonderful scientist. Maria Reiche, by the way, was not an archaeologist. Her profession was measuring streets and so. And she, Maria Reiche, in the beginning, suggested it is an astronomical calendar. Then they made exact measurements for astronomy in direction of the stars at a certain date, and it was not a calendar. It turned out it has nothing to do with calendar. So the University of Dresden came here, and I have asked them questions which archaeologists would never ask. Archaeologists ask for datings, for wood, for bones, etc. I asked the scientists of Dresden, go here with your measurement, find out, is there a change in electricity, in the electrical resistance, as I explained before, between the desert and between the line? Can you measure any difference between the desert and between the lines? Can you find some changing of the magnetic field? Again, in the desert and out in the lines. Make a comparison between it. Do you find in Nazca some elements which should not be there, which have nothing to do with Nazca? So they came up with their instruments, by the way. They worked together with the Universidad of Católica in Lima. You see, Nazca is a world, United Nations world, UNESCO world, whatever. Okay. In earlier days, 50 years ago, when I was the first time in Nazca, we could park our car, we could climb into the desert. In the meantime, this is completely forbidden. You cannot go, not one step into the desert. There are always little aircrafts flying over Nazca. Soon as they see a car has parked and some people step out the car, it takes 5 minutes, and then they come with big motorcycles and you are under arrest. And they ask $20,000 to let you free again. So it's absolutely crazy. So, in the meantime, the University of Dresden, they need the permission to go in the desert, by their foot, of course. But they did not receive the permissions in the beginning, except if they worked together with the Peruvian university. And that was the University Católica in Lima, a Catholic university in Lima. So the Dresden University worked together with the Peruvian university. And then they came out. And as I said before, they measured the electrical resistance. They measured the changing of the magnetic field. You remember this mountain which was cut off with a zigzag line beneath? There, the magnetic field had changed so extremely that their measuring was completely on the end, the needle, you know, the needle of measure, completely at the end. So, and we know exactly that 8 meters in the ground, there is something which changes the magnetical field. So if we know there is something there, because you can measure it, why don't we go there and dig it? Because you are not permitted to put even a stone away. You are always under observation. The University of Católica, the Dresden University, they were always accompanied by local securities. They were able, they had the permission to use their measurements, but never to make any diggings, nothing. Or I asked them, is something in Nazca which should not be there? And again, on this zigzag line, the cut-off mountain, they found at the end very strong amount of arsenic. Now this is poison. If you would eat a little, you'd simply die. What has arsenic to do there? So we know for definitely sure something in Nazca is wrong. But we do not know what it is, because you have no permission to continue. Here we are in South America. You see all these guards. They are shown with helmets or some rays coming out of their head. It's all copied. This is the Sahara Desert in today's Algeria. Now, South America or California is far away from the Sahara Desert in Africa. And there were no link in ancient times. There were no ships flying. Why did they make such gigantic figures on the ceiling? This in original is 6 meters high. It's not a small thing like this. What have they seen? On different continents, they make similar figures. But they had no contact. You see here? It looks really like an astronaut with his arm here. Sahara Desert. This is here in your country, not far away from here. It's in Arizona. In Arizona, we have the Hopi Indians. And the Hopi Indians, they have a lot of cave paintings and wall paintings. This they call the star blower. This is Hopi. There are thousands of it in the Hopi territory near Nairobi or irgendetwas heißt ja gleich. Machen wir weiter. Now again, the Hopi Indians, they make these figures, huh? The Hopi make these figures, you know them. They are called kachinas. You can buy these figures. When you go to the Hopi territory, there is of course a souvenir shop, and in the souvenir shop you can buy these figures. But there is a scientific literature also. Then you learn what are these figures. They are called kachinas. So what are the kachinas? Sagen wir das nächste. The kachinas were the spiritual teachers from heaven who teach the forefathers of the Hopi. That's why they represent it today in this form with these figures. And one of the old India, his name was White Bear, he told me, Eric, we do all this because the teachers from heaven, they have promised us that in the far future they will return. So that no generation is afraid when they will return, that they always remember the teachers from heaven. We make these figures. So the same story as in Arizona with the Hopis, because they do not want to forget it. They repeat this dance and this song, and they imitate the man from heaven in this straw garment, so that they do not forget it. He promised to return one day. What comes next? You see, like the man with big glasses, here we are in Japan. These figures are called dogus. They come from the Stone Age, but the Japanese Stone Age people had no idea of glasses. So what did they copy? Cargo cult. They saw something different and they copied it. They did not even know what it was. Okay, but no. So, you understand what cargo is. Cargo cult is copying. They copy something which they do not understand. They imitate something. And in my eyes, the same is true with Palenque. You know Palenque, but I have to show you the newest explanation of Palenque. Zeigen wir Palenque. This is the so-called Temple of Inscription in Palenque. Who was in Palenque? No one? Oh, 2 or 3 people. So, they call it Temple of Inscription because up here they found 853 inscriptions. Then in 1952, the Mexican archaeologist, Professor Dr. Rutz, he found a little groove up here. And they took out a stone plate, and they found inside the pyramid a stair. But at that time, in 1952, when this was discovered, the stairway was completely closed with stones. It took 3 years to take the stones out of the pyramid. Then they go down until 7 meters underground, 7 meters under the pyramid. And there was a door in the form of a triangle. At that time, there was no, was it guitar, grit, fog, yeah. They just made this, they closed it just now for the tourists. So the door, a triangle. When they opened the door, roughly, they destroyed something. They looked into a room, and the room was 7 meters high, higher than this. And there was a big stone plate down on the ground. This one, that's big because that's 3.8 meter long, 2.2 meter large, one block, not composite, but one block, one monolith. And on this, a wonderful imitation. Zeig mal wieder. Kommt der Film. You see the man here bending forward, almost like a racing motorcyclist. He has some musk on his nose. He uses his 2 hands to manipulate some control. He is sitting on a chair. Outside of his chest, something is locking. He's sitting in a frame. He's surrounded by a frame. And outside the frame, you see something like a linking flame coming out here. Now, since 1952, since the discovery of this, in the archaeological textbook, you find 14 different scientific explanations what this is. First of all, around this plate, there is an inscription. And a little part of this inscription could be translated. We know the figure is Pakal. Pakal was the second last ruler of that city of Palenque. We know definitely it's Pakal. Then the archaeologists say Pakal is sitting in this frame. But this frame, you have to look at it as the open mouth of a monster. So Pakal is sitting in the open mouth of a monster. The monster is eating him. And the monster represents the earth. So Pakal is falling into the earth. And out of his chest, here, comes the tree of life or the cross of life. And in the back here, what do you see? Something like a linking flame. In archaeology, they say these are just the stylized hairs of the beard of the weather god. So they always looked for so-called natural explanations. In the meantime, the situation has completely changed. You know, they learned more about the translation of the Maya hieroglyphs. Before, they knew only about 10%. In the meantime, they know about 70% of it. And the most modern epigraph, the epigraphs are men who translated, professors in Maya specialists, are 2 American ones. It's a father and the son. They all come from the University of Texas. Their name is Stewart and Stewart. And in their newest textbook about Nazca, the newest translation, they say, yes, it is Pakal, that's true. But Pakal is not falling into the open mouth of a monster. Pakal is running out away from the earth. Everything here can be explained with cosmic symbols. It has to do with cosmos, with the universe, and not with the earth. It is not the tree of life or the cross of life. So the most modern interpretation underlines my interpretation. Now, of course, I am often accused we should not look at this picture crosswise, we should look at it lengthwise, the other way around. And that brings me to an idea. I just show it, Simon. This is the Borobudur in Java, Java, Middle Java. So, and you see, this is called a stupa in Buddhism. This stupa, according to mythology there, the stupa is the small vehicle with which you can reach the big vehicle of the god. The stupa has in total seven different meanings. But one of the meanings is the stupa is a small vehicle. With the small vehicle, you can reach the big vehicle in orbit, like a space shuttle, like Vimana in India, etc. Now, because they believe that this is a small vehicle, the stupas are not empty. In every stupa, somebody is sitting. Who is sitting there? Young Buddha. What is he doing? Look, he's sitting in this position here. So the newest explanation underlines what we think. It has to do with cosmos, with universe, with space shuttle, etc. up there. This is the writing around the slab. And only part of it is translated, not everything. There are even dates. And the dates are completely controversial. They are dates for over 1 million of years here. But the Maya culture did not exist 1 million of years. Now all these fellows, obviously they were in space with the help of some gods, of some extraterrestrials. And the same thing is true for our biblical Abraham. Everybody knows Abraham. The text I just will tell you now is very similar to the book of Enoch. Enoch and Abraham had obviously a similar experience. That's good, you are here. Wonderful. Okay. So, there is an apocryphic text which is not part of the Bible. Apocryphic text, it's called the Abraham Apocalypse, they call it. And in this Abraham Apocalypse, Abraham himself, like Enoch, tells in the first person what happened. Again, two beings descended from heaven. These two beings, they dressed him, Abraham. They took him out into the heaven. And when he was up there, he again said, I wish to fall down to earth. The high place on which we stood always turned itself around a certain axis. I explained this yesterday. When you are in a mother spaceship in orbit, the mother spaceship will always turn around its axis, because by doing so, you create a centrifugal force. And by centrifugal force, you receive an artificial gravity inside. But nobody in Stone Age could have known this. Zeig mal bitte. That are just pictures out of an old Bible to explain you what our ancestors had in mind when they read this Abraham apocryphic text. Zeig mal bitte. So he says, I was up there, and the high place on which I were always turned itself. Once I saw the earth up and the stars down, and then it was the opposite. The stars were up and the earth down. So not only Enoch is making such a quotation, also our progenitor Abraham. Everybody knows the word Sphinx. So, and everyone knows the Sphinx. And when we see the Sphinx, we always think, we always think of the Sphinx before the Great Pyramid. But there is not only one Sphinx. There are different sphinxes. The plural of Sphinx is not sphinxes, it's sphinxes. So anyhow, there are many of them. And sphinxes are always mixture between man and animal, or mixture between different animals. You see, this is the Sphinx as you know it. But soon, as you go on the Nile, up to today's Aswan, on every temple, you find different Sphinxes. Not only this one. Here we say it's the head of the Pharaoh. And the head of the Pharaoh is sitting on the body of a lion, because they want to demonstrate how strong the lion is, and the head, the intelligence of the Pharaoh. But that's again just a fairy tale, because up the Nile you find hundreds of different sorts of sphinxes. Here we are in today's Luxor. In Luxor are two temples, the Luxor temple and the Karnak temple. Between these two temples is a distance of 3.8 kilometers. And in ancient time, all these 3.8 kilometers was one road, right and left, covered with sphinxes. There were hundreds of it, just between the two temples. Today they start to restore some of them again. So what finally is a sphinx? A sphinx is always a mixed creature. Two different bodies are mixed together. We call it chimeras. Chimera. No, they have beautiful faces. Now we are again in Saqqara. And under the desert of Saqqara, there are kilometers and kilometers of tunnels, and nobody knows it. Every day, thousands of tourists are standing before this step pyramid here, and they are not told that in the ground, under their feet, there are kilometers and kilometers of tunnels. And what are in these tunnels? One of these tunnels is called the Serapheum. Since about 5 months, a little part of the Serapheum is open for the tourist. Before it was always closed. That's the opening. This opening of the subterranean tunnel, you will see, is large enough to drive in with the car. Serapheum. And right and left are big niches. And in these niches, the most gigantic sarcophaguses which you ever saw in your life. The underpart of these sarcophaguses have a weight of 60 to 80 tons. The cover itself has 30 to 40 tons. Gigantic. And all this massive material is granite from Aswan. Aswan is 1,000 kilometers away from here. Look, this precision work here. Incredible. How clear the lines are. And all this was done in Stone Age time. Now it was known to archaeologists all the time from the Egyptian writings that the old Egyptians, they adored an animal which was called Apis. Apis was again a mixed creature. Apis had the head of a human, but the body of a bull. That was Apis. In some time, Apis had a strong bull head, but Apis was not comparable to other bulls. There were normal bulls in ancient Egypt, but Apis was a separate bull because Apis was created by the gods. Apis was not born by a natural sexual act. He was made by the gods. And Apis was a holy figure. Nobody were allowed to touch Apis, to kill Apis, to chase him. Nobody. He was holy. The humans were afraid about this Apis. Apis sometimes destroyed little temples. He killed humans, children, old men, and the humans were not allowed to hunt him, to kill him, to do nothing. He was an animal from the gods. So all this was known because of ancient Egyptian writings. Now, Auguste Mariette, the French archaeologist, about 120 years ago, he was standing out in Saqqara, and then, of a sudden, he found that subterranean tunnel with these gigantic sarcophaguses. And of course, because of these sarcophaguses, his first idea was, these are the sarcophaguses for the holy Apis. Because they are so gigantic, there must be Apis bulls in there. They opened the lid, the cover, and inside was no Apis bull, was all smashed little bones covered with bitumen. Bitumen is this black material here, which you need on the street. So they took out this bitumen mass, and in the desert they analyzed it. The bones were from different animals, not only one sort of animal, different forms of animal, and they could, in cases, not even analyze what sort of animal it was. But there was no Apis bull in none of these sarcophaguses. Now you have to understand that in old Egypt, every living form was mummified. Not only the pharaohs, for example, dogs, or little animals, or crocodiles, snakes, scorpions, apes. Every living form in old Egypt was mummified. For example, under Saqqara, in these tunnels, which I mentioned, there are 4 millions, you hear correctly, 4 millions of mummified birds. 4 millions. Down in these tunnels are 200,000 mummified crocodiles. 200,000 mummified crocodiles. Why at the hell have they mummified all this? You see, every bird was in a little box. They call this box canopes, like here. 4 millions of them. Now, why has the old Egyptians mummified every living form of life? Why? What was the purpose of it? They believed in the reincarnation. They were sure that every living body will be reincarnated later, but only if the body is preserved as a whole. So it was not allowed to destroy the body of an animal or a human. But I just told you, inside these sarcophaguses, there was smashed and crushed bones. So this is contradicting the old Egyptian religion. They were not allowed to destroy an animal or a bone. Why did they smash animals? Again, there are old Egyptian writers. One of them is called Manetho. Manetho was a historian, and he wrote about the gods who descended to earth 14,000 years ago. And he said, the gods made mixed creatures, and he counts them. He gives about 20 different sorts of creatures which the god made. He said, for example, they mixed birds with the human body. They mixed bull, the body of a bull, with the head of a human. You remember the Minotaurus from Greece? Again, a story like this. They mixed apes with other animals. They mixed even dogs with fishes. So why should all this be? Is this just legend? And not only Manetho, Strabon, Diodore of Sicily, Herodotus, they all wrote about these mixed creatures. Why? Did they really exist? At least we find not only inscriptions, we find these mixed creatures. Here, these winged gods. In archaeology, they say they are working on the tree of life. But you see, it's not a tree. It's DNA. They mixed the creatures. Here again. It does not look like a tree of life, but you have 4 bases of the DNA. And we even find wonderful pictures of these mixed creatures in different museums. Go to the British Museum in London. There is a stele called Salamazar II, about 1600 BC. And you see the elephant has a normal form. But what is this being here? This creature must have been alive because it's held very strongly. We have others of them. This one is held on a chain. So we have not only writings about mixed creatures, we have pictures of mixed creatures. Obviously, they did exist. And what have these mixed creatures to do with these sarcophaguses and with the extraterrestrials? Imagine a mother spaceship is on the way, and these extraterrestrials, they know, of course, different planets. There are not only planets like ours, there are planets which probably are a little closer to the sun, so it might be a little hotter there. There are planets who maybe are a little far away from their sun, it might be a little colder there. There are planets which maybe are bigger than the Earth, so the gravity is stronger. Planets which are smaller than the Earth, so we have less gravity, for example, like on the moon. All these extraterrestrials, they know different planets with different temperatures and different forms. And now they are on Earth here. And they observe, for example, a crocodile. And they realize the skin of this animal is heat resistant. And then they see a lion. And the lion is very strong with his muscles. They say to themselves, why don't we mix the heat-resistant skin of this one animal, the crocodile, with the muscles, the force of a lion? And now they create mixed creatures. Also the holy Apis animal. And they say to the humans, these animals are holy animals. You are not allowed to kill them, to eat them, to chase them. We made them just for observation. Apis was one of these animals. I said before, Apis destroyed temples. Apis killed humans, and the humans were not allowed to harm him in any way. One day, the journey of the extraterrestrial was over, and they started again with their mother spaceship. For that, they did not have to take mixed animals with them, not necessarily. All what they need is a little bit milligram of DNA. That's all. And another volt, they can recreate the animal again. So these extraterrestrials disappear. And what happened on Earth? Some of these mixed creatures were still alive. And the humans were afraid of it. Now they were waiting until these mixed creatures died on a natural way. And soon as they were dead, they said, now we need underground tunnels. They made these underground tunnels under Saqqara. They went to Aswan, where the hardest granite is. They transported the hardest granite from Aswan down the Nile to today's Saqqara. They chiseled it. They made the most gigantic sarcophaguses. They put the sarcophaguses in these subterranean tunnels. And now they smashed and crushed the bones of these dead animals. And they put it all in this sarcophagi to be sure that they will never return again, that they are not reborn again. They cover it even with bitumen, and then a 30 or 40-ton cover, lid over it. So these sarcophaguses down there were not sarcophaguses for bodies to be reborn. This was a sort of jail. They should never return again. You can prove this story because the old writers wrote about mixed creatures which the God made. We have the pictures, some of them you just saw, and we have the bones which are crushed, because according to their religion, you were not allowed to crush any bone. They were afraid of it. I know professors in genetics, and they know that story which I just told you, and the genetics told me, Erich, just bring us a little example of these bones, and we find out immediately if this is artificial, because no natural evolution does not create mixed creatures. If some humans would be stupid enough to have sex, for example, with an ape, there is no result. There's not the mixture between a human and the ape coming out of the mother's womb, because the figures of the chromosomes are not the same between apes and humans. The same thing happened with all these animals. If a dog has a sexual contact with whatever, there is no result. Only the dogs between themselves can do this, but not with other animals, because the figures of the chromosomes are not equal. So natural evolution does not create mixed creatures. If we had mixed creatures in the past, they must be the result of genetic design. Without it, no mixed creatures. And soon as you have genetic design, you can prove, hey, there's an extraterrestrial influence, because our ancestors at that time had no genetic design.